many people think of apparatus. What does this mean? These two P's opposite each other. And this is actually a representation. It is the Egyptian letter, or Hebrew letter, Diresh, and means two opposite divine principles of good and evil, which have to be kept in balance. And this is actually one of the prime tasks of the Grail Knights, that is not to destroy the evil and only leave out the good, but to keep the good and the bad in balance, to keep the good and the light and the dark in balance. Now from Eschenbach you have the Wartburg castle. This is a very famous castle in the middle of Germany, in Thuringen, where Hermann von Thuringen was a castle, was the head of the castle. This was also a place where Wolfgang von Eschenbach was reported to have sung in a sort of singing contest. You also have there the place where Luther translated the Bible, where he's reputed to have been visited by the devil and went through an inkwell at the devil. You also have the Wagner Hall. It's a very, very cultural center, this Wartburg Castle. This is where Wolfgang von Eschenbach was thought to have written part of the Parzival. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, this work is based on a book by Werner Greub, a Swiss military officer who died a few years ago in 1998. Wolfgang von Eschenbach und die Wirklichkeit des Graals, Wolfgang von Eschenbach and the Reality of the Grail, was published by the Philosophisch-Anthroposophische Verlag, the Philosophical Anthroposophic Publishing Company in Dornach, Switzerland. It was published by the so-called Goetheanum, Free School of Spiritual Science, which was founded by Rudolf Steiner in 1923. And this was the second Goetheanum because the first one was destroyed by arson and burned down in 1923, in Sylvester in 1923. And this is, in other words, constructed a design of the second Goetheanum. This was the carpentry shop behind the Goetheanum, where many of the carpenters built things that were needed for the first Goetheanum. As a matter of fact, when I first came to the Goetheanum in 1973, I had a room here, one of these windows, looking out onto the Goetheanum, which was quite an experience to be up there. The Hermitage. This is the so-called Andlauer Hof. This is actually the villa, the mansion of which the English garden was a part. The Hermitage has always been a private property, but it's accessible to the public. And here you have, for example, a weapon of Andlau, Andlauer Hof, this is called. Andlau is a little village in the Elsass, and there have always been historic connections between the Elsass and Arlesheim. In fact, the patron saint, now this is a print from the time of the English garden of the 18th century, 1785, showing the same area, but a little bit more idealized. Here you have the same area which we're going to be. Now this is the place, the location where we think Parzival was born. This used to be, this is for now is the Museum Dunterlinden, very well known in Colmar, Convolai it's called in the Parzival, above, showing the resurrected Christ. And it's very interesting that Parzival was supposed to have been born in a location which now houses such religious and paintings which attract hundreds of thousands of people because of their very vibrant colors. But the episode at the court of King Arthur in Nantua, near Geneva, Parzival goes to Gouvernemans, his uncle, for which you of Arles further. We see this area here around Arles where the battle raged. There's also the area that Vincent van Gogh painted. I always used to have this painting in front of in my bedroom, at the top of my bed. I was very much liked this painting. I always thought it was. Now then, the story moves on to Gawain, the counterpart, you might say, of Parzival in a good sense. In the sense that Gawain is an Arthur knight who saves damsels in distress and saves all the 400 damsels imprisoned in the empty Grail castle of Klingsor, which we're going to have a look at too. And in the sense that Parsifal was not a Arthurian knight, but a Grail knight who was actually supposed to develop more spiritually, and not in a material sense. And in other words, whenever King Arthur went, he acted as a sort of a medieval police force in keeping order and combating crime, you might say, whereas Parsifal was more the spiritual part and gave directions as to the purpose of all this, the purpose of humanity, why we are on earth, and the mysteries of Christianity. We see the following scene. Here again is the Fontaine à Salvage, the entrance to Mont Salvage. What happens is Parsifal becomes Grail King. He asks the redeeming question, Uncle, what ails thee to unfort us? The spirit, Wolfram says, that resurrected Lazarus now also begins to work into unfort us. He is healed from his terrible paralysis and his paralyzing sickness that he had. And the first thing that Parsifal does as Grail King is he goes down to visit Terpsent, who initiated him into the Grail secrets. And this is one of the most important parts of the whole Grail story, where Wolfram has Terpsent say that the fact that you became Grail King is one of the greatest miracles that ever happened, because I told you at one point that you can't really fight for the Grail. You must be chosen by divine providence to it, but you have achieved the Grail on your own, out of your own initiative. This has never happened before. This is a new area, a new era in the Grail history of mankind, so it interprets Greub that, and so you can see that the hereditary, the blood principle of the Grail kings is now being laid to rest, and the spiritual principle takes over. In other words, Grail kings are no longer Grail kings on the basis of blood lines. Heredity principle is being supplanted by the spiritual principle. And on this note, we would like to end our Grail geography excursion, and perhaps with the last look at the founder of the science of the Grail, Rudolf Steiner, without whose work this whole lecture, this whole work by Greub would not have been possible. Rudolf Steiner, born 1861, died in 1925. Okay, now this is part from a suite that I wrote when I was studying composition at McGill University, the conservatorium there. I wrote it in about 1963 at the occasion of the suicide of a friend. Threw himself in front of a train. So it's a sad piece, and Treurmars of Dutch, funeral march, you might say. But it's also dedicated to humanity in the 20th century, because humanity went through a kind of a death throes with all the wars and disasters, etc. So it's part of a suite. It has two movements, okay?